How do you feel the average worker in News UK feels about us being here this week? Do you think they feel empowered or oppressed by us being here campaigning outside their building?
I don't think that in any way they'd feel oppressed. I think people who are in Unite Union are quite used to demonstrations being held outside their workplaces, because in many of their workplaces they're not recognised, so they're used to, and I think they would see it as an aid that someone is trying to raise the issues that should be raised.
Unite also represents banking workers, doesn't it, Leslie?
Yes.
If we would have a demonstration outside the Royal Bank of Scotland against how it caused the financial crash, do you think the people working in the bank would object to that? Do you think there's any reason? Of course not. I think people actually here are very happy to see us. They're probably fed up with being on the extra security they've got on, obviously regard us as some kind of big threat. But no, I don't think anybody, from what I understand, they're actually very happy to have people here.
Any other questions?
Hello, it's me again. Me, Simon.
I'm a planting questioner.
I wanted you to talk about the integration or the incestuous relationship between politicians and News UK. Because talk about the police, so they would have got prosecutions out of their collaboration with News UK. Why do we see the four rent boys holding pictures of the Sun? What has Murdoch got in these people where they are so subservient and compliant to this man?
That's the fine thing about this demonstration, isn't it? Because we've got people standing here who aren't afraid of Rupert Murdoch and News Corporation. And it does make you think. I mean, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron are terrified of him. I don't know if that's because they've got something to hide, but it's because he is so powerful in their terms. Because they believe that they depend on Rupert Murdoch and the publicity, the coverage that they get from his media, to be able to do their jobs. It's not true. I mean, it was a very corrupt relationship. As a matter of fact, it was what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, the revelations that have come out about the relations between Murdoch Press, the police and the politicians, is the biggest exposure of corruption in Britain's ruling class, of the connections between horrible connections between all the people at the top of society there's ever been. So I would criticise not just the politicians of Murdoch. I want to know why British people are standing for it. We had the Leveson inquiry and everyone said, oh, that was very nice, and nothing much has come out of that at all. You'd have thought thousands and millions of people would have been on the streets. You would have thought it would be a big political issue. You would have thought all the parties at this election would be bringing in laws to limit the extent of ownership that big media corporations can have. I mean, that's the problem. The problem is that News UK, as it's called now, is just too big. It's just too powerful. It just intimidates too many people. And the only answer to that, if the politicians are going to be such cowards, is to limit the size that a company can get to limit the circulation of the number of title and paper that they've got. Now, that's what one of the campaigns that we're involved in. I'm not just from the NUJ, I'm from the Campaign for Press and Broadcasting Freedom, which has just published a media manifesto for the election. I've got copies here. And it's calling for laws to limit the extent of media ownership, to stop any company getting as big as Murdoch again.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. So, would it be possible could we hear that now? Is it a lengthy manifesto, or could we?
Please.
Brilliant.
4 pages, will that do?
We have a week.
This is it. Where's the camera?
And can we find it? Is it published on the internet somewhere? Can people?
It is, yes. It is. The address is in here. I've got copies. This is a manifesto for media reform. Where's the camera? That's it. And we've got 5 demands. We've got 5 demands. And the 5 demands are... Yeah. controls on media ownership, independent, trusted and effective regulation of the press, well-funded independent public service media, protection for communication rights, and action on lobbying and transparency. Protection for communication rights, that means the internet, that means snooping, that means the collaboration between governments and their spy agencies and the big media internet corporations that hold these vast databases of every single thing we ever do in our lives. We're a media campaign organisation, but we've taken this one on because this is such a big thing that affects everybody. Yeah. Because you might have seen the revelations by the American whistleblower Edward Snowden last year. This just shows the extent they have the capacity to look at absolutely everything if they want to. And it's a big debate about allowing this by law. So we've added that. But these are the main things are to not to interfere with the way what they put in the papers. The journalists have a right, of course. You don't censor in advance ever anything. But media must be accountable for what they've done afterwards, and media must be stopped from fucking around over people's lives the way they do. Woo!
Yeah.
So I've got copies of this here.
Yeah, is that all right? Just come back again. The reason I suppose I was so interested in that is because we've been formulating this charter for a free and democratic press. Yeah. So there's parity there. I'm just wondering how we might be able to explore that overlap and support your campaign and vice versa.
There's overlap, but there's differences too.
Yeah.
You're calling for a boycott of all the national papers. Come on.
No, that's not the wording.
Well, no, okay.
All corrupt.
You'll call it, yes, but people work in these places. They depend on them for their living. It's a matter of the way they're run, the ownership and the way they're run.
Sure.
I want more people to buy. I want people to buy more newspapers. I want people to watch more television and consume more media. Not just because it's people who work there, but also because people should be well informed. People have got to be well informed to be able to tackle these issues, to get onto this kind of thing. So we certainly can't support that. And I don't think people should. And also the limit that you've got 5% of ownership is much too low. I mean, you just can't function. The market can't function like that unless you're going to blow up the whole thing. All right, blow the whole thing up. But if we want to maintain a positive, progressive, independent, accountable media industry, you've got to have, on a national scale, quite big media organisations. It's how they're run. It's who owns them and how they're run that matters.
Can I come back again?
Yeah, of course.
I don't want to monopolise things. I think this is. One of the things that appeals to me most about the Occupy movement is the way that we embrace the emergent nature of things, and we don't tend to set things in stone ever. It tends to remain fluid, and so this charter is another living document. So we can. I would be interested in continuing this debate beyond this week of action. And further exploring that overlap, because I think there's going to be disagreements. I think you've possibly misunderstood the call for the boycott, for example, and we could explore that parity further, maybe. Yeah. Would you be up for joining delegating someone to the Occupy the Media Billionaires group?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Cameron said, "Give me a straight answer." Yes.
Hurrah! Thank you very much. Nice one.
I would not accept that reading the Sun is making somebody well informed. And so that's why we support a boycott of the Sun. And we also believe that buying Sky is funding the Sky. And that's why we're calling for a boycott of Sky as well. We agree with you. We think a boycott is not to destroy the papers, it's to put pressure to change the ownership. And you never get pressure unless you actually tackle them in their pockets. And so that's why Occupy really seriously is calling for a boycott. It's not to attack the workers, it's actually to put pressure to change the ownership.
Yeah. Well, of course, actually. For instance, a lot of people boycott the Sun. People in Liverpool boycott the Sun. Yeah. Everybody that I know who worked for Murdoch in Wapping before Murdoch went to Wapping None of them buy any Murdoch papers. Yes, on an individual basis, of course, people don't. But I think rather than destroy the Sun, I want to make it better.
Yeah, but we don't want to destroy every single newspaper is a precious part of our democracy, but whilst it's owned and corrupted, it's destroying our democracy. Yes. And so we believe we're actually putting pressure on to change the ownership, and through their pockets. We're on the same page, it's just how we get there. I don't think actually if loads more people buy the current corrupted paper that we will get to where we need to. I have a question, if I may. Ofcom.
Listen, perhaps it's not the press that's fucked up, it's democracy. It's part of our democracy, isn't it?
And we don't agree with how democracy is.
Exactly. It's chickens and eggs.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between us there. You say the cowardly politicians won't pass the laws that we need passed, but the reality is they're human beings like you and I, and they say if we decide to try and pass the laws that are required, we're out of office immediately. And that's why we're here, because this is where the power is, not in Downing Street, not in the Liberal Democrat headquarters, not in the Labour Party headquarters. On such time that is, no matter who's in charge. It's not that we happen to have always lily-livered politicians. It's the reality is the power is here, and if you want to stay in office, not in power, you have to kowtow to these guys. And that's why we think there is a huge need in our democracy to reclaim it, to do that. We won't ever get the politicians we deserve until we have the media that we deserve. Can I ask a question? Do you want to come back on that? Ofcom. Who appoints the head of Ofcom or the leaders of Ofcom, and what's your view about the appointment process?
It's a point. Ofcom regulates broadcast media and telecoms. It doesn't regulate the press. It doesn't have anything to do with the press. In fact, even the websites of newspapers are regulated by their own tame regulator, which used to be called the Press Complaints Commission and is now called the Independent. It's called the Independent Press Standards Organisation, which is not independent. And the way you can tell it's not independent is because it's called independent. Whenever an organisation has in its name independent, you know it isn't. Like the Independent Police Complaints Commission, like the Independent Newspaper, which when it was started had limits on its ownership. It was never a progressive paper, but it had limits on its ownership. Now it's the plaything of a Russian oligarch, and it still calls itself the Independent. Sorry, what was the question?
Who appoints the...
Oh, Ofcom is appointed by the government, by the Culture Ministry, entirely, and a lot of its work is just straightforward regulation. But as a matter of fact, it does have quite a good way of regulating commercial broadcasting. It does have quite, they broadcast a lot of shit on them, and it comes down on them sometimes. I mean, it is. Funnily enough, although it's government appointed, it's more independent of the companies than with newspapers. It regulates the BBC to some extent, but it doesn't have anything to do with newspapers at all. That's another fault in the charter, which says Ofcom's nothing to do with the press, because nobody actually wants the press and its websites to be regulated by the state, by a government organisation. It's frying pans and fires, whether you're under the control of the bosses or you're under control of the government. Both are bad, and what everybody wants is media that are independent of both.
So the challenge therefore, is it okay to have this debate? Is that okay, guys?
Yeah. Go.
So therefore the challenge surely is to address that. How do we get regulators that are accountable and not captured by Tories or Labour or captured by the Murdochs? So therefore, should there not be some interesting way of appointment, maybe via the judiciary, or via some there's some sections that are elected by various bodies or something, and looking at widening the appointment so that the board is appointed by various sections. Let's say the trade union has a member on the board, the workers have a member on the board, the civil society has members on the board, and the government has a couple of people on the board, and maybe one for the companies as well. What does that sound like?
This is getting a very particular discussion, but there's a lot positive in what you say. this is actually quite close to what the recommendations of Leveson were for regulating the press and its websites. We have to keep saying press and its websites. We're not just talking about printed material now. There are a lot more people who look at newspaper websites and actually read the paper. Daily Mail gets Mail Online. Does anyone ever look at that? 14 million hits a day or something. It's just unbelievable. But the system, the Leveson system, is for an independent regulator set up in the kind of way that you're talking, which will be subject to kind of supervision by a government body. It couldn't be more remote than it is. But it's not working because the press are refusing to have anything to do with it. Because just like they set up a fake trade union here, they set up this fake regulator called the IPSO, the so-called Independent Press Standards Organisation, which is just nothing more than the Press Complaints Commission with a new name. Same people, same money, and everything. So, I mean, they are scared to take on these companies to impose regulation on them, even independent regulation. This again is in our charter. That's something that's got to be legislated for.
A couple last questions. Anybody else got a question? Right, that.
Yeah, I really support the old movement of pamphleteers, which is what all this came from. Which was when people would just get a printer, and we've got access to printers like that now, you know. I think if you're going to improve the Sun newspaper, just make it more absorbent and softer and 3-ply. In that particular publication. But that, I'm not denigrating the work that journalists do, or at least try to do, because like a journalist once said, one article, a Group 4 security man was saying it's more than my job's worth to comment, and he managed to get that past his editor. That was the journalist word. That's what I can manage to get past my editor. So, but the issues I have are with the control, the fact that Rupert Murdoch and the politicians will stand there holding his newspaper is an absolute admission that this man can change government regimes like a military mercenary, like the dogs of war of the media.
Man did it.
It's disgusting. But would you like encourage people to get into pamphleteering, making smaller leaflets? Like I started off the union movement. I started off the diggers, and
they did. Yes, this was the origins of the press. But I'm not sure about pamphlets. I mean, look at this. We've all got pamphlets in our hand, but there's only 10 of us here. I think we're talking online, aren't we? I think we're talking about websites. Anybody can start a website. I don't understand why there aren't more progressive and radical left-wing websites. In America, there's ones I look at. There's very few in England. I mean, the British, it's all very well for us to complain. The British left, the British people have got to get it together to organise more protests themselves. It's fine to blame the politicians and say democracy isn't working. Democracy will work as much as we make it work. Bosses are always corrupt, and governments are always dictators and bullies. Of course they are. It's up to people to resist.
Surely the press itself is responsible for vilifying the unions through the 70s, the miners' strike, even its own actions at Wapping. What were they thinking? What were they doing? They kind of they need to make amends and reparation for that, and get a real newspaper out with real stories. State of the Nation would be a nice real State of the Nation would be a really good sort of thing.
Yeah.
Any other questions coming out of that debate? If I can ask two final ones from me, if that's okay. One is sorry, catch your name. Leslie, I thought it was Leslie. For the people who actually joined the trade union in here, or who joined Unite, or who joined NUJ, what are the benefits for them in the fact that it's a non-recognised union? What do they get out of it? What's the positives?
Well, obviously they would get a lot more benefit if we were to get recognition from the employer, and then we would be able to bargain on things like wages and working conditions. However, even without that, they do get the benefits of being represented by the trade union, getting advice from their trade union if they have employment difficulties. And it probably won't surprise you to know that a lot of people do have difficulties in their workplaces. They have grievances, they have disciplinary hearings, and the union obviously helps people out. That's what the union is there to do.
Do you help them with legal advice and stuff like that as well? So that's really useful. Okay, that's hopefully some of the viewers out there will understand that's one of the benefits. And one last question, Tim, you mentioned there that we have to make democracy work. You have mentioned there that people have to organise more protests. We're organising a protest. And tomorrow is going to be a big day, Saturday, at Occupy Rupert Murdoch Week. We've been here every day listening to speakers like yourselves explaining the issues with the media and the corruption of our political system by the 5 billionaires. We've been here holding the space day after day, building the power, getting the word out. And tomorrow we're going to have an amazing day. In the morning we're going to have a trial of Rupert Murdoch, the People's Trial. Then we're going to presume he's found guilty. We're going to have Reclaim the Sun in the afternoon, a big rally. Beating the Bounds, which is about beating away the evil. Traditionally did it in ancient societies. And then at 7 o'clock we're going to have a peaceful, non-violent direct action actually in front of the doors of Rupert Murdoch's tower. And would the trade unions be willing to get the word out and get them down here? Because actually we believe the time has come. We have run out of time to tackle the social injustice. We've run out of time to tackle environmental change. The planet's going up in smoke. These people are proselytizing. Will the trade unions come and support us? Tomorrow. Today is now.
Thanks. Well, I'll certainly be here tomorrow afternoon. I am chair of our Publishing and Media Workers branch, and I have circulated to all our branch activists details of this demonstration.
Yeah. Can you email them about tomorrow night?
I can resend it, yes, definitely.
Thank you. And Tim, do you know anybody who might be able to circulate to the trade union movement about this amazing non-violent direct action? We think something special will happen outside Murdoch Tower tomorrow evening.
I think I would urge them to come along and report it.
Thank you. I think that's enough for today, for that session. Anybody final comments? A huge thanks to Leslie and to Tim for coming and sharing us their experience of the trade union in journalism and the trade union movement within the media for non-journalists. And it's actually really important that we get the messages and the lessons from the past, so we actually understand how we got into the mess that we are in today, and the mess that Britain's democracy is in today, the mess our media is in today, and the mess our environment is in today. In some ways, we probably had no idea what was at stake at Wapping and the consequences that have arisen out of that. So thank you for sharing your history, and thank you for coming today. And tomorrow is hopefully a day where we actually start reclaiming some of the negativity and put some positivity back into our press and democracy. Thank you so much.